Hello, my name is Marisol Rubio. I'm the Director of Government Relations for the San Francisco Bay Hispanic Chamber of Commerce. I'm here at Lima Restaurant in Concord, and I have the privilege and pleasure of being joined by Council Member Carlyn Obringer, who's running for Board of Supervisors in District 4. Hello, Carlyn. How are you?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me today. I look forward to speaking with you.
Likewise, we're happy to have you. We're excited to hear more about you. So just to start out, I would love to learn a little bit more about who's Carlyn and what experiences in your life from even childhood, if you'd like to go back, really brought you into the sphere of public service.
Sure. So I grew up, I'm the daughter of a public high school teacher and a small business owner. And so public service was part of my upbringing, if you will, just by nature of the work that that my parents did. And I grew up in Western Pennsylvania, actually. So it's a lot of really hardworking middle class people there. And I came out to California in 2002 looking for new opportunity. I had graduated from college, and there weren't a lot of jobs in Western Pennsylvania at the time. I came out to the Bay Area to go to grad school, and then ended up with my first job here in the Bay Area. And so at that time, I really credit some of the friends that I made, as well as my husband, who I met on this journey, who helped me to really get more civically engaged. And so I started getting involved with the presidential election in 2004. So I started out as a volunteer related to the presidential election, and then over time got involved with local community groups. I had the privilege of chairing the Commission on the Status of Women here in Contra Costa County from 2008 to 2013. I was involved with environmental organizations at a regional level, including the Sierra Club. Then in 2010, there was an opening on the Concord City Council. One of the council members at the time announced that he was not running for re-election, and so I had the opportunity to develop some leadership skills. And one of the areas that was of interest to me at the time, and it still is of interest, is the former Concord Naval Weapons Station and the great world-class promise that property holds. And so while I was not successful in that race, I came in 5th of 10, it really helped me to better understand the Concord community. I fell even more in love with this community. And from 2010 to 2016, served on design review board, the planning commission, was chair of the board over at the nonprofit organization Monument Impact to try to ensure that we were getting more resources into the monument community and creating greater connectivity between our immigrant community and the rest of Concord. Involved with the Chamber of Commerce here, started our Art and Wine Walk, which is coming back this year as the Concord Crawl. So you name it, I've been involved. And then in 2016 was successfully elected to the council, and in 2020 successfully re-elected. So I'm very proud to have had the opportunity to serve as mayor here in Concord in 2019, vice mayor in 2018, and just serve in leadership in the biggest city with, I would say, the most diverse population in Contra Costa County.
Absolutely. Well, thank you. How do you think all of those experiences have shaped your worldview and have prepared you for this position?
Sure. So serving on the Board of Supervisors it's a big moral responsibility, because the Board of Supervisors is overseeing the county, which is the social safety net, right? So that is where the county hospital is, and I was just there yesterday with some of the workers who, are fighting for better pay, more staff members to take care of the most vulnerable. So, the county is our social safety net in the sense of providing health care, behavioral health. That's where most of the programs for housing are located. You also have responsibilities that mirror what you have to do on a city council, right? So related to public safety, economic development, so creating more local living wage jobs so people don't have to commute 2-3 hours round trip. Also transportation and making sure that people can get around more efficiently, right? Even kids getting to school, seniors trying to get to their doctor's appointments. So, some of the experience that I've had on the city council, we have had to pivot to more social issues over the past several years, especially because of the pandemic, but even before. We know that we have a housing crisis, not just in Concord, but in Contra Costa County, across the Bay Area. Now That unfortunately has even spread across the country to Pennsylvania, where I grew up, where it's very difficult for, we've just seen it. Basically, you have to make $50 an hour and have, or if you're one adult that's trying to support a family of four, you now have to make at least $67 an hour in order to cover housing, childcare, healthcare, transportation, all of these things. So my goal here in Concord has been working toward a more livable Concord in terms of trying to provide more supports to people to get them out of, to make them more housing secure, trying to assist our unsheltered and provide more supports there, helping to create more supports for behavioral health by being part of the group that stood up the Miles Hall Community Crisis Hub. And then when it comes to, and we can get into more detail as we talk, but things like creating local living wage jobs, I've had success doing that here in Concord through goodwill visits, meeting with existing employers that are headquartered here, finding out what their needs are, and finding out how we can meet those needs so we can grow the workforce here, as well as serving on regional transportation bodies to help get people, for example, more efficiently from their homes here in Central County down to job centers like Bishop Branch and the Hacienda in Dublin, Pleasanton. So what I would just say is, here in Concord, as the biggest city where we have everyone living here, we have affluent people and we have people who are just starting out their lives in the United States with pretty much nothing except the will to survive and thrive. And so I think that whoever's serving on the Board of Supervisors has to be mindful of all those people when you're making a decision and making decisions for the greatest good. So I look forward to putting this experience in these different areas to good use to serve the people of District 4 and people of Contra Costa.
Thank you. Yes, there's a lot to unpack there, but it's great to know that you have all of those ideas at the forefront. It's good to know. So in terms of healthcare, I mean, I think the pandemic truly just revealed how some people, the uninsured, how important it is to make sure that the uninsured are insured, and that not only insured, but also have access to quality, affordable, and accessible healthcare. What ideas do you have in mind about how, in your role as a supervisor, you might be able to help?
Mm-hmm. So this is really important, and I applaud the governor for his move to try to, and we'll see if this passes in the legislative session, but the opportunity to move everyone onto Medi-Cal. So right now we still have this group of people who are between, I believe, age 26 and 49 who are not able right now because of documentation status to receive health care. And so I think that we've all come to realize now that health care is a human right. And so I would support the governor's proposal there. And in the meantime, I want to applaud the Contra Costa County Board of Supervisors. They just invested more funding in the CARES, the Contra Costa CARES program. So, and they're going to be doing outreach to get more of these people that right now are not insured, get them into the county, at least, healthcare system, right? And preparing them to go and receive their health and wellness checkups, because one of the things that it costs everybody, right, whenever somebody does not receive health care for years and years and years, and then they develop a chronic condition, and then they go to the emergency room for service, right? That doesn't help anyone. So I appreciate that the Board of Supervisors is putting funding to actively seek out people who are not currently insured, help get them into a system of health care. And I think that will help to prepare them whenever we hit January 1, 2024, for everyone to be able to receive health coverage and assistance. And I think, there's many things, though. It's really important that it's quality care. And so in order to, and we're also not just talking about physical health care, we're also talking about mental health care. Thank goodness now people understand that mental health care is just as important, and you have to take them both together. So, it's everything from making sure that we're properly staffed at the county hospitals, right? And as I mentioned in my previous remarks, there's some real challenges right now, and even with, some of the bargaining units, right? There's like the nurses have been going for almost a year without a contract, and they're compensated, understaffed. So we need to be able to address that across, quite frankly, all the departments, because the county is only as strong, and this applies not just to healthcare, but all of the other departments, it's only as strong as the workforce, right? And sadly, I think that we have a chronic challenge of people coming here, training, doing really good work, and then leaving. They might still live here in Contra Costa County, but they decide to work in Alameda or even San Francisco counties because they can make more money. And it gets back to that livable wage that I was talking about earlier, right? So we need to take care of people in that way. I think also the pandemic, we've had some real success here in Contra Costa County through our community health workers who have gone out and they have trust with community members. And so when I look at other counties where they've had a difficulty engaging with the Spanish-speaking population, the immigrant community, to get vaccinated and boosted against COVID, here we've had a lot of success, and it's because we have workers who are from community, in community, who have been trusted messengers, helping to break down barriers between the system and the community. And so I think we need to continue to honor that work by investing in nonprofit organizations that already have those relationships, right? To break down silos and really, because again, that's the vulnerable population that the county is mandated to serve. So I think those community health workers are a critical piece of our healthcare infrastructure, and we need to continue to invest in and work with them. And I think that we can build on the success of COVID. So for example, can we work with these partners now to work with populations that struggle with chronic conditions like diabetes, like high blood pressure, like kidney disease, right? And so when I was serving on the board of Monument Impact, that was one of the areas that we really focused on was healthy living. So it was everything from helping people understand how to go into the grocery store if they're new to this country and understand that the cheapest items aren't necessarily the healthiest items. So how can we teach behaviors where, okay, this is how you can purchase produce and things in a cheap way and produce healthy meals for your family on a limited budget, right? And the Zumba classes, for example, that Monument Impact and others offer to get people moving. And there's also a behavioral health component too, right? So again, those kind of trusted partners, we need to continue to invest in them and work with them to be messengers to help teach healthy living and behaviors and help people hopefully prevent some of these chronic conditions, but manage them if they do develop them. I think another area of opportunity is we have a physician training hospital, and so that's a real asset that we have that I think a lot of people don't know about. And so investing more, getting more physicians trained and then into clinics and having the opportunity to get real world experience right here in Contra Costa. So I think that that's very exciting. Also, the federally qualified health clinics, we have 11 of them, and they serve, again, this very important population. And so how do we make sure that everybody's talking to each other, and that and I know right now our congressman received some funding for us so that we can have everybody talking together, and for example making sure that when a patient comes in to receive say physical health care, that they're, whoever's also managing their mental health care, everything's aligned. So there's an electronic health record so that we can track this person's progress, right? So it's not a new intake every time somebody is coming in to receive care. So I think that we need to have more coordinated systems, and we're on the road to doing that. But it really comes down to a few things. It comes down to investing in trusted partners. It comes down into, and one area I didn't mention is growing the pipeline too, because whether it's the trusted community partners or even someone who's doing behavioral health clinical work, it's really important that we have people from the community doing work in community. So investing more and creating deeper partnerships, say with DVC and Contra Costa College. I was just learning about the Spirit program the other day when I was here for an event honoring mental health, because this is Mental Health Awareness Month. And so really helping people to get certifications so that they can then go in, and especially people with lived experience, and have jobs where they're working. And so in other words, if I'm going in to receive behavioral health support, I want to see someone who looks like me, who I can relate to, so that there can be some trust and there'll be a better success. So I think investing more in these kinds of pipeline development programs And then finally, let's not forget our schools. The governor had allocated a significant amount of funding to stand up school wellness centers in the county. And so while the Board of Supervisors does not have direct oversight of the schools, that is for the Board of Education and the Superintendent of Public Education, but we can still ensure that funding is going from the county health plan to create the school wellness centers, because we want to have preventative care available for students, and we want to have teachers trained and school staff to see, if a young person's starting to exhibit signs of behavioral health duress, we want to get them a warm handoff to treatment right away, so that 10 years down the road, that's not an unsheltered person that now we're trying to get them substance abuse and behavioral health treatment, right? So I think there's a number of things that we can do in trying to prevent chronic disease and behavioral health challenges on the front end, and helping people to manage them, and also growing the pipeline of care. So we could talk about this all day, but the point is that significant investment continues to need to be made in this area.
Absolutely. So what I'm sensing is that you're really looking at this from a sort of a community-driven, of course with the support of government, a community-driven, preventative and pro-health approach to try to prevent chronic disease, which is oftentimes the most costly, and preventative at the same time. So, and at the same time, you said providing more opportunities and access for training, so you can, and increasing staffing, which would improve access to timing and access to care.
And wages too.
And wages too.
Highly skilled people here.
Absolutely. Great. So we're going to move on a little bit over to reimagining public safety. Some statistics from Cal Matters in July 18, 2019 showed that Black people comprise about 7% of California's population, but account for 15% of police killings. Latinos comprise about 39% of California's population, but account for 46% of police killings. The figures are even more staggering if you look at the number of unarmed people who are killed. About 20.38% of police killings involve unarmed people. So what are your ideas to create a safer, more cooperative relationship between law enforcement and the community? And should police, well, I'll hold off on the second question, but let's focus on that. What can we do to build a more positive relationship, a more trusting relationship, and one that perhaps thinking about training and support for law enforcement to make sure that they're capable of properly coping with these circumstances?
Yeah, well, this is a really big question, and I think we're all still learning in this area. I think it's also extremely important. I do check in regularly in Concord with our monument community, with some of the promotoras who are directly involved with community, to hear what the community's thoughts are. And it's interesting how actually in the monument community, people would like to have more police because of some of the issues that they deal with certain gang members that are in the area, and we have had, unfortunately, an uptick in some recent gang-related homicides very recently, and also, trying to have more attention on the bad actors, if you will. So. What we've tried to do is create partnerships between the immigrant community and PD, at least during my time on the council. And I'll share with you one of the very first things that I did when I was elected in November 2016. And after that, community was very scared, as you can understand. And so one of the very first things I did was work with community to put together an inclusive city resolution at their request. And so the idea was, I kept hearing from people, okay, we hear anecdotally that Concord PD is not going to partner with ICE, but we need a piece of paper that says that to help us feel safe. And so we sat down and I co-authored this legislation, and we had representatives from community, including Monument Impact, as well as our police chief, who is Latino. He's no longer our police chief. Our current police chief is also Latino. But we sat down and drafted the language in partnership so that people had that piece of paper. And then we made sure that all staff members, not just members of the police department, but also city staff in general, understood what that meant, right? So we trained everybody on that. And what we do try to do as well is hold community events that are beneficial to community. So we do a bike rodeo, we do that in the monument, and now we're doing that in my district in the northern part of Concord, which also has a significant Latin population. And so what we do is we have bikes that are donated, and Concord PD is also there. They're one of the sponsors. So the traffic officers are there, and they'll give out stickers, not tickets. And then we have, food trucks that are there, people doing haircuts. It's just kind of a fun event that the community looks forward to. And so trying to create interactions with people so that whenever they're interacting with the police, it's in a safer, friendlier space, right? As opposed to, coming into contact potentially if there's a violation of the law. And so we try to do that. Another example that I've seen through my day job that actually seems to be quite successful is over in Alameda County, the Deputy Sheriff's Activities League. And I've had the opportunity to work with them on a very small project, but I've been very impressed related, I'll just give one example, with their Dig Deep Farms initiative. So Dig Deep Farms is located on property owned by the Sheriff's Department over in Alameda County. And what they do is they grow organic produce, and then they partner with one of the Alameda Health Services to create meals for Medi-Cal patients that are health specific for those people. And then some of the people who are growing and cultivating the produce are formerly incarcerated people. This is their first job coming out of jail. And then the people that are driving the produce to the recipients, the meals to the recipients, are also formerly incarcerated individuals. So this is their first job that they have coming out of jail. And oftentimes they don't stay in the job that long, because the good news is they develop a positive track record with this work, and then they head over to another job. And so it's a very exciting, and that's just one example. I know that they're doing partnerships with youth and community. So I think the more kinds of creative partnerships like that, I would like to bring that kind of model over here, because I don't really see that happening right now at the county level, either with youth or even, kind of this really positive, virtuous cycle that is happening, like I said, over in Alameda County, where you're giving people second chances. There's a health component, there's a job component. And so I think that those are the kind of things that I would like to bring to the county.
Sure, and in that sense, it's helpful that because you're bringing in close proximity in a social setting, law enforcement and the community, and you're also at the same time providing opportunity for formerly incarcerated individuals to be reintegrated into society. What can we do, however, in the sense of making sure that our police officers are best suited and in the best position possible to adequately cope with these situations, and what can we do in circumstances that are being investigated to create more transparency and accountability and reporting out in a timely manner?
So one other thing I did want to mention before I answer your question is, I think that we also need to take a look at opportunities, or to avoid opportunities for people of color to inadvertently interact with law enforcement in a negative way. And so what I mean by that is, for example, the Miles Hall Community Crisis Hub. I'm really proud to have been a part of that, both in my professional day job capacity as well as a city council member, because that is going to focus. I guess what I would say is some of the tragedies that we have experienced here in Contra Costa County have been whenever law enforcement has been called to address a behavioral health crisis, right? And so having this system set up where someone will be able to call 988, and then you have a behavioral health clinician who is triaging the system as the situation as a dispatcher, I think will enable us to avoid some of those situations, right? Prevent those encounters, those sometimes fatal encounters from ever happening. I do think it's very important for everyone to receive training. I can't even imagine what it is like to be a police officer. I think it must be an extremely, extremely challenging job. I did go through a 4-hour training to be a firefighter, and I failed at that. But I do think also, in some cases, like at the county level, we do need civilian oversight of what's happening with the sheriff's department. So I think that there needs to be some more accountability and transparency and making sure that there's reporting out about what's going on. And whenever there are investigations, having someone who is independent, like separating the position of the sheriff and the coroner, for example. I think that those are some other ways to create some more transparency and accountability. Those would be some of my proposals.
Great. We're moving on a little bit to education. I know you don't really deal with that, but perhaps just making a bridge from talking about reimagining public safety. What role, if any, do you feel, number one, that police should have their presence in schools or not, and why or why not? And then let's start with that. And what can we do, I guess, also? What ideas would you have? What can we do? I know you don't directly have an impact on this, so perhaps more just what possible roles, supportive roles, could the Board of Supervisors provide to schools to try to stop the school-to-prison pipeline?
Oh, wow. Okay. So when it comes to school resource officers, so I will just share with you what I have observed here in Concord after talking with principals at different high schools here in Concord. So we have a few different high schools that serve different demographics. I will tell you that for the most part, the principals here would like to have the school resource officers back for a few reasons, because they had very positive, the school resource officers that they interacted with, at least until 2020, whenever the program was eliminated here in Concord, at least, and within Mount Diablo Unified, was that officer was, it's kind of like what we were talking about earlier, where they were kind of the more approachable police presence on campus. So one of the officers, for example, at Mount Diablo High School, used to run an auto shop program for students after school. So that was an after-school activity that everybody felt welcome to participate in. And then, another example would be, one of the homicides that I was mentioning was gang-related, and unfortunately, so that was over at Ignacio Valley High School, and one of the students was involved in the gang. And so what has been shared with me is if there had been a school resource officer, maybe the shooting wouldn't have been able to be prevented, but at least there would have been kind of, it wouldn't have been such a surprise, because there would have been kind of insider understanding at the school as to what was going on and what the issues might be between the rival gangs and the students, if that makes sense. So I have heard a request to someday bring those back into the schools here. So every community is different. So I would say, that would have to be a community conversation, because I know that, for example, in East County, the young people came to the school board and said that they did not want school resource officers, right? Whereas that did not happen here. So I think it just depends on the community and what the experience has been and what the designated role of the school resource officer is as well, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so then in terms of trying to eliminate the school to prison pipeline, I know that Senator Skinner had passed a law, I think it was as far back as maybe 2019 or 2018, to reduce suspensions, or it was no longer so easy to suspend and expel young people. And so we know that whenever young people are sent home, often they end up getting involved with the juvenile justice system, and so that is one of the reasons it's called the school to prison pipeline, right? So I would have to go back and see what has happened. We did have COVID pretty soon after the implementation of that law, so I would want to go back and see how has that law changed what was happening previously in terms of the suspension and expulsion rates. I think it also gets to what kind of supports can we have available at schools, because, for example, whenever I talk to some of the teachers at Mount Diablo High School, they would really like to have a space where there are counselors and there are not necessarily teachers, but there's caring adult volunteers who are there. So if a young person is acting out for whatever reason, that they don't just automatically get sent home, but they have a safe space where they can go to receive some counseling and support if that is what they need, or at least some adult supervision so that they're doing some work in school, right? Rather than losing the educational opportunity and then potentially being sent home into a dangerous situation without supervision that's going to get them into trouble. So I would be supportive of those kinds of policies.
Yes, and absolutely. Every adult that's in a school could be possibly help a child in need.
Yes.
And you never know who that person is going to be. So makes perfect sense. Those classified employees are very important.
They are.
So we're going to move on to environmental issues. A recent study from the found that non-Hispanic whites breathe in about 17% less air pollution than they cause by their own consumption, while Black and Hispanic people inhale more than 50% more pollution than is generated by their own actions. What initiatives will you take to ensure that there's environmental justice?
Okay, well, that is also a big question. And so I've been watching what's going on over in Alameda County. I know that they have a group that is working right now to try to eliminate trucks. I believe it's on the 880. So that corridor, anybody who's lived there, it's kind of like people who are living in the Monument community right now. They're triangled in, right? Because there's freeway pretty much all around them, and they're very much impacted. So this has been an issue that has been on my mind for years, is how do we, because this impacts people's lifespans, right? It impacts how much health care they're going to need to consume just to stay alive. So this is a big challenge, but I think, I've seen, for example, some of the shoreline communities that are in mostly West Contra Costa as well as Alameda County. They've been coming together and they've been saying what they want to address, because some of these folks, they're already experiencing the impacts of climate change as there is shoreline erosion and then toxic chemicals and other, water is coming into their property. Toxic chemicals are leaching, into the soil near where they live. And so I think that there's going to have to be, whenever, at least in that case, we need to work with community to create, what is the climate action plan going to be. And I think there also need to be some reparations for people as well. And I think the big challenge, though, is we do need more housing, and so it's kind of difficult to remove people, if they're already living in a particular area. And again, I'm thinking about the Monument community or even the northern part of Concord, which I had someone who moved there from Walnut Creek, and he said to me, how come this census tract where I used to live, people live 8 years longer, right? So I think that we first have to acknowledge the issue, and then as a member of the Board of Supervisors, they have this emergency climate action plan that they passed, I believe, in 2020 or 2021. And so I think that we need to look at this holistically, and we need to implement as many of those measures as possible. So getting more electric vehicles available to people to reduce particulate matter in the air. But we also have to understand, because I've been working on this, I'm an EV driver myself, but it's very challenging when somebody is living in a Class C apartment building and there might not be enough electricity to charge, the building might not be set up in such a way that it can handle, a fast charger or even an EV charging system. So I think that we need to make more investment in those communities, particularly in things too, replacing windows, filtration systems, air conditioning for people even, because they're terribly impacted whenever we have the fire danger and then everybody's told they're supposed to shelter inside. But what if your windows don't close properly, right? What if all of the ash and everything is leaking into your child's bedroom? So I think that there needs to be more investment, and the best way to do that is to, as quickly as possible, implement the county's emergency climate action plan with direct, I guess what I would say is direct input from impacted community members. And I think a piece of that does need to be some kind of reparation as well. Reparations.
Yes, and I'm sure they probably get impacted also, I would imagine, life insurance type of issues because of where their zip code is and where they live. So another really big component is dealing with fossil fuel companies and the pollution that is being caused there. There's a lot of important stakeholders in there, as you know. Workers are involved and their families, and we have ambitious goals to hopefully get to zero emission by 2030. Some people are pushing back to 2035, but time is really not on our side. So what ideas do you have about how we can what can we do to achieve that goal in a timely manner and in a humane manner?
Well, I've been learning more about this as I'm running for supervisor, and it's a very complicated issue because, as you mentioned, there's an economic component. So the refineries are some of the largest employers, and they pay some of the highest property taxes to the county, right? So you have to take a look at that. Also, as I've interacted with workers at some of the different refineries, many of them come from fence line communities. So now they're not necessarily living there now, but some do, but some grew up there. And so these jobs, as you said, they're local living wage jobs, they're family sustaining jobs. So you want to be very careful with that. I mean, I grew up in Western Pennsylvania at a time when all of the steel mills had closed. And so I used to drive to visit my grandma on Sundays for Sunday dinner and drive past basically the rusted out skeleton of steel mills. And there were a lot of people of my parents' generation who had worked there and started out creating a really positive life for their families. And then the steel mills went away, and some of those communities have not recovered to this day. So we have to keep all of those things in mind, but we also are running out of time, as you mentioned. So I'm really excited. I know that, again, our congressman was able to secure $750,000 to put together basically a working group that is supposed to be working on the plan to Vision Zero, right, to net zero. And I think you might even be part of that, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, I am.
Yes, yeah, exactly. So I would say I'm really looking forward to the work of that group that you're serving on, which does bring together, community members, subject matter experts like yourself, as well as people who are representing workers, people that are representing community, people that are representing the industry, and people that are representing the transition that we are aspiring to. So I think that there have been some steps that have recently been taken by Marathon and Phillips making transition to producing alternative fuels. I think we also, though, need to create a market for them. And what I mean by that, so I've already talked about having an EV driver. So I drive a poor man's EV. I have a Nissan Leaf, so it's my third one. But, I also like to take an annual trip up to Portland, Oregon, and I can't drive my EV there in the winter for many reasons, but not the least of which is we don't have a good fueling system set up, or an energizing system, I should say, right? And so there's still a lot of challenges with that. So deep investment needs to be made for the non-Tesla drivers out there, quite frankly, for the charging infrastructure, and then some of these alternative fuels as well. So making it as simple as possible for people like you and me who are very busy to fuel up with alternative fuel and move on. So, but I think there's a lot of exciting wind projects to be built, hydrogen projects, other things that will create jobs for people as they're building them and beyond. So I think just what we need to be careful of is that we don't leave the workers behind as we're making the transition, right? So, because I think and we also, quite frankly, still are flying across the country. So there's so I think that we really need to make a lot of investment, some deep investment, and treat this like this is the crisis it is. Because I think people kind of wake up whenever we're all huddled inside, whenever California's on fire half the year, right? And then right now on a beautiful day like today, we can take care of it another time. So we need to really treat it with that sense of urgency. And again, that comes back to the task force that you're serving on, as well as the environmental emergency climate plan that the county is supposed to be implementing.
Absolutely. It's a huge undertaking, but it's perhaps the most important one of our time right now. So we're going to move on to small businesses. So I would like you, as you know, the small businesses have really taken a hit because of the pandemic, and now they've been put under almost this acute stress because, especially in light of the snatch and grab incidents. They're feeling a little bit unsafe, uncertain, both financially in terms of their safety. What can be done? From your position as supervisor, what would you do or think about providing more of a safety net financially perhaps or socially to make sure they feel safer in their community?
Sure. So small businesses are extremely important. And, from the time I was serving as planning commissioner, as I mentioned, to the present, working on a daily basis to support small businesses, whether it's patronizing them, promoting them on social media. In fact, it's Happy Small Business Month. So I've been promoting some of the small businesses. We have many here in Concord, and many are either they're owned or operated by people that live directly in the community or nearby, and a lot of the workers are local as well, so they really are an important part of our ecosystem. And so that's why during the pandemic, I co-authored not one but two grant programs so that we could get, it was basically $2 million in grant money that we got into the hands of small business owners. And we worked with intention to make sure that even Spanish-speaking business owners were made aware of the grants. We had people walking up and down the Monument Boulevard to let people know. We had a translator available for Spanish language inquiries because we knew that this was a make or break time for businesses. And so now they are moving into this new phase. They're still facing worker shortages, which is, I was just talking to a business owner 2 days ago, and while her business is booming because everybody loves her Nicaraguan food, she can't find enough dependable workers. And so that's something that we need to figure out as well, and that could be partially a wage issue as well. We have to pay people more to do work that is important to the community. But also, I think, you were asking what can we do related to safety. So I'm part of the supporting the Todos Santos Business Association here in Concord, and I hear about these issues all the time. And I hear about a business owner shows up and the window is broken again, and it's extremely costly and it's expensive, or somebody's trying to break in to steal equipment. So one of the things that I think that we need to do, so here in the city of Concord and the city of Oakland has done this. I know that other cities like Clayton and Danville, where we are in the process of installing license plate readers and cameras at the entrances to our cities and along our commercial corridors, so that we don't have, quite frankly, as many police officers as we once did. In fact, we're to the level, it's an historic low for patrol here in our city, and it's like that across the board for the most part in other communities. So we have to also use technology smartly. So we're installing these so that we can, if someone does commit a crime, we can address that more quickly, and we don't have to use as much manpower, but also as a deterrent, because I've heard from other elected officials that whenever they implement this technology, word gets out and people don't necessarily want to get caught on camera, so they're not as likely. Now, with that said, I've seen in San Francisco, they've done some grants to help small businesses pay for broken windows and other of these kind of issues that you're talking about. We also here in Concord, and I would like to see us, you're asking about as a member of the Board of Supervisors, implementing, we have a program, it's called a camera registry program. So if you are a homeowner or a business owner and you have a camera, you can register it as part of the citywide system. And so that can also help to deter or at least, address criminal activity more quickly. So I think that that's something that we're looking at potentially financing those cameras for small businesses through a grant, those businesses that don't already have a camera system. So I think that that's something that we could do across the board. And then also working, we have the Small Business Development Center. So what other kind of supports can we provide in terms of, the crimes that small businesses face? It's not just physical, it's also people that come around that are looking for ADA violations, for example. that make money off of that, taking advantage of small business owners. It's also cybercrime as well. So I do think that we need to make more classes and supports available at a very reasonable rate and in multiple languages too for small business owners so that they can protect themselves physically but also online transactions. And also, take preventative measures so they don't become the victims of lawsuits as well during this very challenging time.
True. And access to information in those multiple languages is so important because, as you know, Latinos, the most recent census showed Latinos are the largest growing business owner population and a lot of immigrant populations in general. This is their pathway to the American dream when they come here. So very important. So we're going to move on a little bit to some questions about the economy as a whole, talking about wages. As you see, the gas prices are almost at $7. And food, the cost of food is going up. Even just entertainment on the weekend is costing in every way more. What can we do? One, to make sure, and do you believe in the fight for 20? This is something that's coming up now, especially because all these cost of living expenses are going up. Do you support that? And if so, how do we get there? And then I would also like to think, I know you talked earlier about keeping good jobs within community, how does that tie into transportation and all these other factors?
Sure. So this is a big, important topic. So first of all, I do support Time for 20, but at the same time, as I mentioned at the very beginning, is that even a livable wage, right? It's not really. So we can support that, and I will be out there advocating for that. And I believe that there's even circulating right now a ballot measure for $18 an hour. To legislate that. I did see, it's kind of interesting that the piece of legislation signed into law that increased the minimum wage to $15 an hour, that was by then Governor Jerry Brown, it included an inflation provision. So I saw that as of January 1st, 2023, there are going to be wages that are going to increase above $15 an hour because, unfortunately, inflation has triggered that provision. But with that said, again, it's still not enough. So I think we need some new legislation. I think we need to be very realistic. So we could model it, though, after what was done by Governor Brown, just figuring out what the next step is. At $18 an hour, is it $20 an hour? Does it need to be higher, quite frankly? And also understanding, we were just talking about those small business owners. But I think we need to take a look and see what are they actually paying now? Because the small business owner who I talked to, she had already raised her wages, and I think that they were at least $18 an hour just to get servers. So you might hear from people that are decrying this is going to destroy small business, but I think we need to do a little bit of research to find out what are they doing already to be competitive, right? Because in this sense, the market is kind of working. And she did also share with me that, chain restaurants, they're able to pay a lot more. So let's find out. So I would like to just get a lay of the land, if you will, to make sure that I'm settling on what the appropriate wage is. What is the market paying, and what makes sense, right? To have a more livable opportunity, because we have so many challenges. I don't know how many times I've tried to schedule coffees just locally, not just in Concord, but other areas, and then I get to the coffee shop and it's closed for the day because they didn't have workers. So we need to understand that if we want these services, we do have to pay for them, right?
Right. And you're absolutely right. These chain restaurants are actually paying very well. I know Starbucks, I think, is starting at $19 an hour. In-N-Out is paying between $18 to $21.50 an hour. So far better than some other job sectors, which leads me to the question about essential workers. We saw how important and vital they were during the pandemic. What can we do? I mean, right now, some essential workers are still being paid $15 an hour. That is a far cry from a livable wage, and with very sparse benefits. What can we do in those circumstances? Oftentimes, these are government-funded jobs.
Yes, exactly.
And I feel like the government should be leading the example.
Exactly. So I think this is a really great opportunity because while governments, we still, whether it's city, county, state, we do have more money than we did before. I mean, we can't solve all of the problems, but at least at this point in time, no one can say we don't have money right now. So, and this is actually unusual, right? I've been serving in government for a while, so it's nice to have a little bit of money. With that said, what we did in the city of Concord, last year, it was time for us to negotiate with some of our workers that were essential workers from public works, for example. And we were noticing that we were starting to lose people to other jurisdictions. And so we did a comparison study of other jurisdictions versus the city of Concord. And we noticed that, hey, some of these people are well below the median. And so what we did was, whenever we did our contract, we actually raised some people's wages by 11% over 2 years, because that is what was needed to at least be fair and to keep them in our community, working for our community. And so I think now that's what the county needs to do, and I've been proud to march with the workers. Like I mentioned, I was over with the Nurses Association yesterday at Contra Costa Medical Center. A few weeks ago, I joined, there was actually a convening of 9 unions that came together, which I think is really wonderful. And they had a demonstration and a rally and a march in front of the Board of Supervisors meeting place, where people did share their stories. And again, it's across the board, where there's 2,000 vacancies, okay, and that it's a big county. We need workers to be doing work, one job, right, not 2 jobs, right? That's not sustainable over time. And also, raising people's wages so that this doesn't continue to be this revolving door over and over and over again. So that's something that I'm committed to doing, just like I did in the city of Concord, where we looked at what was happening, we looked at what other jurisdictions were doing, we looked at what was fair, and we worked in partnership with the workers, right, so that we could meet them in a fair way and keep them in our communities. So I think this is an important, so this is a good time for the county to do that.
Yes. And so kind of going back a little to one of the part of the question about keeping jobs in the community, and that brings me back to the Concord Naval Weapons Station project, because having those community-based contracts and making sure that workers are being hired locally, and it's sort of creating a cycle where it's feeding back into the community.
Yes, that's the goal.
And to do that, and for those who cannot work for whatever reason locally, what are some solutions we can do in terms of transportation to make it more accessible for people and make public transportation a more viable option?
Sure. So I did want to just talk briefly about a few other methods of creating local living wage jobs.
Sure, please do.
So as I mentioned at the very beginning, so in particular when I was serving as mayor in 2019, I had the opportunity to go on a number of goodwill visits with companies that are headquartered right here in central Contra Costa County. And so I found out, okay, what are your workforce needs? Why are you in Concord? How can we continue to keep you here? And then as part of that, I also got involved with Diablo Valley College, and I'm a co-founder of the Diablo Valley Tech Initiative. And so what that aims to do is to leverage DVC with its partner cities that it serves, and try to surface the local tech talent that is here right now, and grow that, and also look at what the workforce needs are. So for example, through a process of inquiry, it was learned that there's a growing field. It's called tech sales, so selling programs like SAP, which I don't quite know what SAP does, but I know a lot of companies run on it. And so as a result, some certificate programs have been created at DVC for tech sales. Now, if you graduate with that certificate, you can go into that field and you can earn, your starting salary is $80,000. So it's not exactly the livable wage we were talking about, but it's on your way, right? And so I think those are the kind of things that we need to do is, find out what local employers are looking for. Another thing I really am looking forward to digging my teeth into is the Northern Waterfront Economic Development Initiative. So that's been going on, I think, since 2014. It aims to develop 18,000 living wage jobs by 2035. And again, one way of doing that is creating education opportunities. And so something I've been leading since 2019 was trying to establish a public institution of higher learning at the former Concord Naval Weapons Station. And part of that includes the cluster industries that were cited in the Northern Waterfront Economic Development Initiative. So things like biotech, for example, food tech, manufacturing, right? And so taking a look at what some of our strengths are right now in Contra Costa, healthcare is another one. what are our strengths? How do we create education programs that are going to bolster that pipeline that we talked about earlier? So again, I think that you can create local living wage jobs through the government, but also government partnering. And that's an area that I think, local cities have been doing on their own, kind of in silos. And sometimes some of the chambers, I've been pleased to see how Concord and Walnut Creek and Pleasant Hill try to partner a little bit here and there. But I do think that the county's economic development department has been lacking. I don't really see them engaged nearly as much. And so they do have a role to play. And so I'd like to break down some of those silos and having us work more closely together on economic development as a region. And I do that now serving on the East Bay Economic Development Alliance Executive Committee, which does include Contra Costa and Alameda County, and co-authoring it's called the Strategic Path Forward. It's called East Bay Forward. So post-pandemic economic development recovery. So marketing this region. So not just Concord's doing its thing, Pleasant Hill's over here, right? In partnership with the county, I think that we can be more successful in job attraction and creation.
Right, working in partnership regionally more so than, like as you mentioned, working in silos, right? As opposed to that. So as county supervisor, what do you think are the three most pressing issues facing your district, and how will you address them?
Sure. So I think they're tied for first place, actually. So there are concerns about public safety, and we've talked a little bit about that already. There are concerns about housing and homelessness. And so those are the top three issues and what's really motivating me to run. And, really trying to assist the unsheltered. And so there's different people within different categories within that population, right? So we have people that are working, but they just can't afford rent. So maybe they're couch surfing. They're living in a car, it might be a single mother with children. It might be a senior woman, because sadly, the largest growing population of unsheltered are senior women, which is very disturbing to me. And so we need to be tackling this head on. And then we have the group that are very visible, people with severe behavioral health and substance abuse issues. And so what I would say is I'm really proud of the work that was done to create the Miles Hall Community Crisis Hub, where silos were broken down. So you did have people, everyone from public safety to people with lived experience to cities and counties, behavioral health, public health, nonprofit organizations, all coming together and really working closely on the structure for what the Miles Hall Community Crisis Hub would look like. And so I think that's a model that we can look to, because right now, there's a lot of silos. So here in the city of Concord, over the past year and a half, we've created our own, we've expanded our case management team. So we now are spending our taxpayer dollars to go out, and it's needed. So we're making the investment to have 2 case managers plus a behavioral health clinician go out into the encampments on a daily basis, 40 hours a week, trying to get people into services, trying to get people into shelter. But we're doing this here, and then the county has their Council on Homelessness, and then there's an entity called All In, the Regional Impact Council, that includes the 9 Bay Area counties, that aims to end homelessness by 75% by 2024. But the way in part to do that is to build more affordable housing, and the cities have most of the land. And so I get very, very, very frustrated because I know about all these different initiatives, but they're not really working very well together. And so they're not working together. That's the bottom line. And so I really want to break down silos following this model that we just, that was put together for the Miles Hall Community Crisis Hub. And I think a member of the Board of Supervisors needs to be directly involved with this. And I do see that in other counties. I don't see that so much here. I see a lot of delegation, that it's like, okay, we'll take that to the housing, homeless, and health services, H3 will handle it. And I'm a very hands-on problem solver, and so I want to tackle this head on. And so part of it, too, is we've got this great opportunity right now with everybody having to review their housing elements, right? We're being required to basically create a plan to show where we would put all levels of housing, right, including deeply affordable with wraparound supports, market rate housing, all of this. And so I think it's a great time for cities and the county to come together because, for example, as we've been working to get a 100% affordable housing project to come out of the ground here in Concord, we put in, back in 2019, $7.8 million into that project. And then that nonprofit developer went to the county to get county funds, and then to the state, and then to the federal government, and hopefully by the grace of God, that thing will come out of the ground this summer, right? But so now the county, through Measure X funding, has created a $12 million housing trust. And so I think it's a great time for the county to be checking in with cities and say, okay, what did you say you were going to do in your housing element? Okay, you're going to be doing some affordable housing here. Keep us posted about your plan. Because when you need to match dollars to get this project to come out of the ground, we're going to be here to help you match, right? Like, let's get this all lined up now. I think that's really important. And then we also need to be petitioning the federal government. I see, President Biden is putting some skin in the game here, which we've desperately needed for many years. And then also, making sure that there's accountability, that all cities are, doing what they should be doing, and not just giving lip service to building affordable housing, and with wraparound supports as well for people with mental illness.
Oh, absolutely. It's crucial. And I think there's a lot of creative ideas out there about how we're going to address homelessness or prevent it, really, because of high risk, like as you mentioned, communities include the elderly as well as the community with disabilities. There's been a lot of creative ideas about creating housing that is accessible for them and supportive in some way that allows them to live independently, yet having all the support they need at the same time so they can live fruitful lives and enjoyable lives.
And one important group that I failed to mention, but I'm interfacing with them right now, is the faith community. So I'm a big supporter of the Yes in God's Backyard initiative that I've seen underway in Santa Clara County. And again, a lot of faith communities, their members, they go out and they feed and clothe the unsheltered. And so housing or helping to house is directly in alignment with their mission. And so trying to make it easier. So there was a bill that was passed last year that enables churches to use some of their parking lot if they want to build micro homes some of the parking spaces, for example. There's also the opportunity to do some senior affordable housing. So I want to make sure that the faith community is also included in the conversation because they have an important role to play.
Oh, absolutely. They're the closest to the community oftentimes, right? So aside from housing, what would it be 2 and 3?
Yes, well, like I said, I think they're all intertwined. Like I mentioned, public safety, and then housing and homelessness. So like I said, those are the three that I see as being the biggest. They're tied for first, but they're three different issues. But sometimes people see them separately, but they all are connected in some way. So yeah, and then when it comes to the public safety piece, again, I am in support, for example, of, we have people that are committing low-level crimes, so I'm in support of having a community court where people can receive basically a community service. I don't want to use the word sentence. That's not the right word. It's more of community service to go do something that is matching with the level of the crime that they committed. So we're going to be, I think, hosting that here in Concord. They're looking for a site right now to do that. But also at the same time, I think it's important to make sure that there are the resources that are needed to help keep businesses safe, to help keep the community safe as well. So it's a balance. So finding, not being punitive, making sure that whatever the penalty is matches what was actually committed. Because I think people are looking for some accountability, but they're not looking for a return of the 3 strikes law, for example.
Mm-hmm. Exactly. So in closing out, I would love to know, just so people know a little bit more, who's Carlyn? Who are 3 public figures, they could be government or otherwise, that inspire you?
Oh, wow. Well, I think Michelle Obama, certainly. I really appreciate the class that she shows and the passion that she puts into helping children, families, community, and always doing it with style and grace. So I really, really admire her. I think too, Madeleine Albright was, an amazing Secretary of State, the first woman Secretary of State, so really broke that glass ceiling, and again was not afraid to, interact with some really powerful people, and representing and being very patriotic and representing the United States. And also she comes from, the greatest generation, which is very important to me. I grew up, that is the generation that my grandparents come from. You see me today wearing red, white, and blue, and it's when I grew up, on Memorial Day, on Flag Day, on the 4th of July, on Veterans Day, we always put the flag out. And so it's so that's really, I think that's what I think of her. I think of that generation and how, that symbol of being American and being patriotic and trying to do whatever you do with integrity and taking care of your neighbor. So that's another reason. And then the third person, goodness, I just really admire, there's so many community members that are kind of unsung, that are doing, amazing work in the community all the time. So there's Gigi Crowder, who's right here at NAMI Contra Costa, who's helping to really, with many people in community moving forward, like the 988, the non-police response to mental health calls for service. There's Cindy Gershon, who's tirelessly helping young people at Mount Diablo High School. I could go on and on and on. So I would say, there's some famous people that inspire me, globally famous people, and then there's some locally famous or should be famous people that inspire me. And so I just enjoy having the opportunity to serve people as a council member, and because I get to interact with these people every day.
Absolutely. So where can people go to learn more about you, your campaign, and where can they reach out to you possibly if they have questions?
Sure. So people are welcome to email me at carlyn@carlynobringer.com. So that's my email. My website is www.carlynobringer.com. You just put in Carlyn Obringer for Facebook. Instagram is Carlyn S. Obringer. I don't know why Carlyn Obringer was taken, but so it's Carlyn S. Obringer, and then Carlyn Obringer on Twitter. So just put in my name and you should be able to, and I'm very accessible. I think my phone number is everywhere on the internet too, so constituents have it. People are welcome to contact me with it whatever way is most convenient for them, because I'm always trying to keep up. So just be a little bit patient, because there's many ways to contact me.
Very true. Thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today and to give the electorate a chance to learn about you. We appreciate your time.
It was my pleasure. Thank you for your interest and for your time today.
Likewise. Thank you. And thank you for joining us today. Have a great day.